Imagine this. You're alone in your best friend's house. Just another ordinary Saturday afternoon. But everything changes in a heartbeat. What starts as a quiet visit turns into a moment that will forever alter your perspective on love, desire, and yourself. This is not just any story. It's a story of discovery, of courage, and of two souls finding each other in the most unexpected places. Are you ready to dive in? Because this is a journey you won't soon forget. Asterisk, I thought it was just another quiet Saturday afternoon alone in my friend's house. A place of comfort that suddenly felt charged with something forbidden. But when his dad walked into my room, something happened that wasn't just unexpected, but also magnetic, a moment that would forever change what I thought I knew about myself. Asterisk, it all happened a few days ago when I was lounging on my friend's bed waiting for him to come home while scrolling mindlessly through my phone. When I heard it, a faint knock at the door, it was so soft that at first I thought I might have imagined it. The house was old, after all, and every creak and groan of the wooden floors seemed to have a life of its own. I brushed it off and went back to my screen, convincing myself that the quiet wasn't unsettling but comforting. But then the door opened. Standing in the doorway was my friend's dad. His tall frame was silhouetted against the light from the hallway. He wasn't a stranger, of course. I'd known him for years. He was always kind, always approachable, the type of man who made everyone feel at ease without even trying. But today, something was different. His usual easygoing demeanor was replaced by an air of quiet intensity. His gaze was steady, his expression unreadable, and the way he stepped into the room slowly and deliberately made my stomach tighten with a nervous anticipation I couldn't quite name. Asterisk, hi, he said, his voice low, carrying a weight that seemed to fill the room. He closed the door behind him, the soft click-click of the latch echoing louder than it should have in the stillness. Asterisk, hi, Mr. Sullivan, I replied, sitting up straighter on the bed. My voice sounded casual, but I could feel my pulse quicken. Why was he here? What did he want? He took a few steps closer, his hands tucked into his pockets, his eyes never leaving mine. Asterisk, you've been spending a lot of time here lately, he said, his tone calm, but somehow charged, like there was something simmering just beneath the surface. I nodded, unsure of where this was going. Asterisk, yeah, Brian, I hang out a lot. Your family's always been so welcoming. It feels like home. His lips curved into a faint smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Asterisk, we're glad to have you here, he said, his voice softening slightly. You've always been respectful, polite, a good influence on Brian. Asterisk, thank you, I said, feeling a strange mix of pride and unease under his gaze. He sat down on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. He was close now, close enough that I could see the subtle lines of his face, the way his jaw tightened and relaxed, as if he were searching for the right words. Asterisk, there's something I wanted to talk to you about, he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. I swallowed hard, the weight of his tone sinking into me. Asterisk, okay, I said cautiously, my heart starting to race. He hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching mine, and then he leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. Asterisk, sometimes, he began, his voice low, you don't realize what's right in front of you until you're forced to stop and really look at it. My chest tightened at his words, though I wasn't sure why. Asterisk, what do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable but somehow intimate, as if he were letting me in on a secret he'd been holding close for far too long. Asterisk, I've noticed things about you, he said, his tone soft but deliberate. Things I can't ignore anymore. A jolt of something, fear, curiosity, shot through me, and I shifted uncomfortably. Asterisk, what kind of things? He smiled faintly, but it wasn't the kind of smile that put you at ease. It was something else entirely, something that made the air between us feel heavier, like it was charged with static. Asterisk, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but I think you already know. I felt my breath hitch, my mind racing as I tried to piece together the meaning behind his words, the way he was looking at me, the way his voice seemed to wrap around me. It was unlike anything I'd experienced before. Asterisk before I could respond, he reached out, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it felt loaded with unspoken meaning, and I found myself frozen under his touch. Asterisk, you've always been important to this family, he said, his voice soft but steady. But sometimes things change, feelings change. I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest as his words hung in the air between us. The moment felt endless, suspended in a tension that neither of us seemed willing to break. Asterisk, Mr. Sullivan, I began, my voice shaky, but he shook his head gently, his hand squeezing my shoulder lightly before he stood. Asterisk, I don't expect you to say anything, he said, his voice calm, but filled with something I couldn't quite name. I just needed to tell you to be honest. And with that, he turned and left, leaving me sitting there with my thoughts spinning. Asterisk, the door clicked softly as it shut behind him, but the sound echoed in my ears like a thunderclap. I sat there frozen, replaying every word he'd said, every glance, every inflection in his voice. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, and my thoughts were spinning so fast I could barely catch one before it dissolved into the next. What had just happened? It wasn't as though he'd done anything overtly inappropriate. His words, his gestures, they could all be chalked up to a concerned parental figure. A man looking out for someone he saw as part of the family. And yet, the weight behind them, the subtle charge in the air between us, told a completely different story. Asterisk, I tried to shake it off, convincing myself that I was reading too much into it, maybe even imagining the tension, inventing a narrative that didn't exist. But even as I tried to calm myself, I couldn't deny the lingering warmth where his hand had rested on my shoulder, or the way his voice had seemed to linger in the room long after he'd left. Asterisk, I stood up, needing to move, hoping the crisp afternoon breeze would clear my head, but it only made me more aware of how still the house was. For a moment, I considered texting my friend, asking when he'd be back. But what would I even say? Hey, your dad just said some really weird things to me. Mind coming back so I don't lose my mind? It sounded absurd even in my head, so instead I stayed silent. But the silence didn't last long. A soft knock at the door snapped me out of my thoughts, and my heart leapt into my throat. For a brief, irrational moment, I thought it might be him again, returning to continue the conversation that had left me so off balance. Asterisk, come in, I said hesitantly, my voice barely audible over the sound of my own pulse. The door creaked open, but instead of Mr. Sullivan, it was his wife, Brian's mom, peeking her head in. She smiled warmly, the same way she always did, her presence instantly making the room feel less suffocating. Asterisk, hey, she said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. How are you holding up? Her question caught me off guard. Asterisk, holding up? I echoed, frowning slightly. She laughed lightly, sitting down on the edge of the bed where her husband had been just moments before. Asterisk, you looked a little tense earlier, she said. I thought maybe Brian said something to upset you before he left. Asterisk, oh, I said quickly, shaking my head. No, not at all. Everything's fine. She studied me for a moment, her expression soft but curious, and I couldn't help but wonder if she could sense the turmoil beneath the surface. Asterisk, well, if you need anything, just let me know, she said, patting my knee gently before standing. We're all always happy to have you here, you know that. Asterisk, thanks, Mrs. Sullivan, I said, forcing a smile. As soon as she left, I let out a long breath, feeling both relieved and on edge. Her kindness, her warmth, they should have been comforting, but all they did was remind me of how different her husband's presence had felt. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze. I tried distracting myself with my phone, with music, with anything that would keep my thoughts from circling back to Mr. Sullivan and the way he'd looked at me. But it was no use. His words replayed in my mind over and over, each time hitting me with the same mix of confusion and unease. Asterisk. Asterisk, I didn't know how, but I wanted to see him again. I could feel it, not over between us. And I was right. By the time evening rolled around, I was exhausted from overthinking, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. Part of me wanted to confront him, to demand an explanation for what he'd said, but a larger part, the part that kept me rooted in place, was afraid of what that explanation might be. It was just after dinner when I saw him again. I'd stayed upstairs, pretending to be busy with something on my laptop, but when I heard footsteps in the hallway, I couldn't resist the urge to peek out. He was walking toward his study, a glass of something in his hand, his movements slow and deliberate. He paused for a moment, glancing toward my door as if he could sense me watching, and I quickly ducked back inside. My heart pounding, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closed door, debating whether I should go after him. Part of me knew I should just let it go, pretend the conversation from earlier hadn't happened, and move on. But another part, the part that couldn't stop replaying his words, needed answers. Asterisk. Asterisk before I could talk myself out of it. I stood up and headed for the door. The hallway was dimly lit, the faint glow from the downstairs lights casting long shadows on the walls. I hesitated outside his study, my hand hovering over the doorknob, before finally knocking softly. Asterisk. Asterisk, come in, he said, his voice calm and steady. I pushed the door open, stepping inside. He was sitting at his desk, the glass from earlier now empty. And he looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Asterisk. Asterisk, hey, I said awkwardly, closing the door behind me. He gestured to the chair across from him. Asterisk. Asterisk, take a seat. I sat down, my hands resting on my knees as I tried to steady my breathing. For a moment, neither of us said anything, the silence stretching out until it felt almost unbearable. Asterisk. Asterisk. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable earlier, he said finally, his voice low but sincere. I shook my head quickly. Asterisk. Asterisk, no, it's not that. I don't understand what you meant. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady but soft. Asterisk. Asterisk, what do you think I meant? I hesitated, my mind racing as I tried to find the right words. Asterisk. Asterisk, I don't know. I admitted, but it felt different. His lips twitched into a faint smile, and he nodded slowly. Asterisk. Asterisk, I suppose it did. I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening as I waited for him to continue. Asterisk. Asterisk, you're not just some kid hanging out with my son, he said, his tone quiet but deliberate. You're thoughtful, mature, and you have this way of making people feel seen. It's rare. I blinked at him, my breath catching in my throat as his words settled over me. Asterisk. Asterisk. I don't mean to make this harder for you, he said, leaning forward slightly. But I needed you to know that you're not alone in feeling something. His gaze held mine, and for a moment, the world outside that room ceased to exist. I didn't know what to say, how to respond, but I could feel the weight of his words pressing against me, pulling me into a space I wasn't sure I was ready for. But ready or not, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over, and the most heart-thumping part was yet to come. Asterisk. Asterisk, I was trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. His words weren't just deliberate. They felt heavy, like they carried meanings too big to unpack all at once. You're not alone in feeling something. What was I supposed to do with that? Did he mean what I thought he meant? Or was I just reading too much into everything again? The longer I sat there, the harder it was to meet his gaze. His eyes seemed to search mine, patient and unflinching, like he was waiting for me to catch up to something he already knew. Asterisk. Asterisk, I don't understand, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled faintly, his expression soft but unyielding. Asterisk. Asterisk, it's okay if you don't, he said. I didn't expect you to. I just thought you deserved the truth. The truth, I echoed, feeling like the floor had shifted beneath me. About what? He sighed, leaning back in his chair and running a hand through his hair. The moment stretched into an eternity before he spoke again. Asterisk. Asterisk about how I see you, he said, his tone quiet but steady. My breath caught, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. What was I supposed to say to that? The air between us felt charged, the weight of his confession pressing down on me in ways I couldn't fully process. My heart raced as a million thoughts collided in my head, none of them making any sense. Asterisk. Asterisk, this isn't. I started, but the words trailed off. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he said gently. I just wanted you to know. His calmness only made it worse. It was like he'd thought this through 100 times, like he'd prepared himself for every possible reaction I might have. Meanwhile, I was floundering, drowning in a sea of confusion and uncertainty. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor as I pushed it back. Asterisk. Asterisk, I think I should go, I said, my voice shaky. He didn't try to stop me. He just nodded, his expression unreadable. If that's what you want. But as I reached the door, his voice stopped me in my tracks. Asterisk. Asterisk, just be careful how you feel about this, he said, his tone softer now, almost hesitant. Sometimes what scares us isn't the situation. It's realizing we might feel the same way. I froze, his words hitting me like a punch to the gut. I didn't turn around, didn't say anything because I didn't trust myself to. Instead, I opened the door and walked out, my legs feeling like they might give out beneath me at any moment. I made it back to my friend's room and shut the door behind me, leaning against it as I tried to catch my breath. My head was spinning, my thoughts a chaotic mess of fear, doubt, and something else I didn't want to name. Was he right? Was I scared because some part of me did feel the same way? I shook my head, trying to banish the thought, but it lingered, refusing to be ignored. The hours passed in a blur. I barely noticed the fading light outside, or the way the house seemed to grow quieter as the night crept in. All I could think about was what he'd said, the way he'd looked at me, and the way I couldn't seem to shake the feeling that something between us had shifted irrevocably. It wasn't until much later, when the house was completely still, that I heard the soft knock at my door. I froze, my pulse skyrocketing as I stared at the doorknob. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't heard anything, but another part, the part that had been replaying his words over and over, needed to know. Asterisk. Asterisk, come in, I said, my voice barely audible. The door opened slowly, and there he was, standing in the doorway with that same unreadable expression. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm sorry, he said softly, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. I didn't mean to put you in an uncomfortable position earlier. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. It's okay, I said automatically, even though nothing about this felt okay. He hesitated, his hand lingering on the doorknob as if he was debating whether to leave, but then he let go and crossed the room, sitting down in the chair by the desk. Asterisk. Asterisk, I don't want you to think I was trying to pressure you, he said. That's not what this is about. Asterisk. Asterisk, what is it about then? I asked, surprising myself with the boldness of the question. He looked at me, his gaze steady but filled with something I couldn't quite name. Asterisk. Asterisk, it's about honesty, he said quietly. About not pretending to feel something I don't. The room felt impossibly small, the air thick with unspoken tension. I wanted to look away, to escape the weight of his gaze, but I couldn't. Asterisk. Asterisk. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Asterisk. Asterisk, because you deserve to know, he said simply. The simplicity of his answer only made it more complicated. I didn't know what to say, what to think, what to feel. All I knew was that my heart was pounding and my mind was racing, and I couldn't seem to make sense of any of it. Asterisk. Asterisk, I should go, he said suddenly, standing up, but before he could reach the door, I found myself speaking without thinking. Asterisk. Asterisk, wait. He stopped, turning to look at me, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. Asterisk. Asterisk, I don't know what this is, I said finally, my voice trembling, but I don't think I want you to go. The words hung in the air between us, and for the first time, I saw his composure crack ever so slightly. He nodded slowly, his expression softening. Asterisk. Asterisk. Okay, he said, and just like that, the dynamic shifted again. The tension in the room thickened as we stood there, neither of us quite sure what came next, but whatever it was, I knew it was going to change everything. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something more electric was to come, and soon I realized that I was right. What was about to come was even more surreal and amazing. The air charge was something I couldn't name, but couldn't ignore. He stood there, still as stone, yet there was a quiet pull between us, a gravity neither of us seemed able to escape. His eyes, steady and searching, locked onto mine, and I realized I wasn't breathing. Asterisk. Asterisk. Are you sure? He asked softly, his voice breaking through the thick silence. I swallowed hard, my thoughts a chaotic swirl. I wasn't sure how, but there was something undeniable about this moment, about him, about the way my pulse raced and my skin tingled under his gaze. My mind screamed caution, but my body had already made the decision. Asterisk. Asterisk, I don't know. I admitted, my voice barely audible, but I don't want you to leave. He took a step closer, his movements deliberate and slow, giving me every chance to stop him. I didn't. Asterisk. Asterisk, you can tell me to go, he said, his voice impossibly gentle. And I will, but if you don't. The unspoken promise lingered in the air, thick with anticipation. My chest tightened as he stopped just a foot away, close enough that I could feel the faint warmth radiating from him. His scent, clean, faintly woodsy, washed over me, grounding and intoxicating all at once. Asterisk. Asterisk, I won't, I said, the words escaping before I could think them through. His eyes softened, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his face, and in that moment, I realized he was just as unsure as I was. It wasn't a game or a calculated move. It was raw, human, and terrifying in its intensity. He reached up, hesitating for a fraction of a second before brushing a stray strand of hair from my face. His touch was feather-light, but sent a shiver down my spine. Asterisk. Asterisk, you're shaking. He murmured, his voice low and intimate. I know, I said, barely able to find my voice. You don't have to be, he said, his hand lingering for a moment before dropping away. I won't hurt you ever. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them so sincerely and certainly that I believed him without question. Before I could overthink it, I closed the remaining distance between us, my breath catching as I felt the heat of his body. My heart pounded against my rib cage, a deafening drumbeat in the quiet room. Asterisk. Asterisk, I know you won't, I said, my voice steadier now. His hand found my jaw, his thumb brushing against my cheek as he tilted my face toward his. If this is too much, he started, but I cut him off. Asterisk. Asterisk, it's not, I said, surprising even myself with the certainty in my tone. And then he kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, as if he was giving me one last chance to pull away, but I didn't. Instead, I leaned into him, my hands finding their way to his chest, his shoulders, anywhere I could hold on. His lips were warm, insistent, but not forceful, and they moved with a precision that made my head spin. Soon, I realized amidst the chaos that this wasn't just a kiss or something so simple. It was more than I had ever imagined. My heart was skipping beats, the world outside dissolved, leaving just us in this bubble of warmth and electricity. His hand slid down to my waist, pulling me closer, and I gasped at the feeling of his body pressed against mine. It was intoxicating, overwhelming, and I wanted more. We stumbled backward, the backs of my knees hitting the edge of the bed, and I sank onto it without breaking the kiss. He followed, his weight grounding me, his hands exploring with a reverence that made my chest ache. What followed was something so electrifying that it made us cross all the boundaries. It felt like he wanted to absorb every inch. I can't go into detail, but you get the gist of what was happening. Asterisk, asterisk, tell me to stop, he murmured against my lips, his breath warm and ragged. Don't stop, I whispered back, my hands tangling in his hair. His mouth trailed for mine. leaving a path of heat down my jaw, my neck. Each kiss was deliberate, lingering, making my skin feel like it was on fire. Every nerve ending was alive and humming. I didn't know where this was going, didn't know how far we'd go, but in that moment I didn't care. All I knew was that I didn't want it to end. His hands were everywhere, tracing patterns on my skin that made me shiver and gasp. He was slow, patient, as if he was memorizing every inch of me, and it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. There was no rush, no urgency, just an overwhelming sense of connection, like we were two halves finally finding their way back to each other. Asterisk. Asterisk. Are you okay? He asked, his voice breaking through the haze of sensation. I nodded, meeting his gaze. Yeah, I said, my voice trembling but honest. I'm more than okay. He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made you feel like the only person in the world. The rest of the night was a blur of whispered words, stolen kisses, and unspoken promises. It wasn't just about the physical, it was about trust, about letting go of fear and doubt, and simply being in the moment. By the time we finally lay tangled together in the soft glow of moonlight, I felt lighter than I had in years. There were no words left to say, no explanations needed. We crossed a line, yes, but it didn't feel wrong. It felt inevitable, like we'd simply given in to something that had been there all along. As he held me close, his fingers tracing lazy circles on my back, I closed my eyes and let myself breathe for the first time in what felt like forever. I wasn't afraid of what came next, though I believed it was the end. It was anything but over in reality. It was merely the beginning, with so much more yet to unfold. And as the first rays of sunlight seeped through the curtains, casting a golden glow over the room, I stirred awake, momentarily disoriented, until I felt the steady warmth of his arm draped across my waist. The memory of the night before rushed back with startling clarity, and for a brief moment, I wasn't sure how to feel. But then I turned to look at him, his face softened by sleep, and everything settled into place. There was no regret, no second-guessing. It was as if the pieces of a long unresolved puzzle had finally fallen into alignment. And the picture they revealed was one of quiet certainty. His eyes fluttered open, catching me watching him, and a sleepy smile tugged at his lips. Asterisk. Asterisk morning, he murmured, his voice raspy and warm. Morning, I whispered back, feeling a blush creep up my neck. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't awkward or heavy. It was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. Are you okay? He asked, his brow furrowing slightly about everything. I hesitated, not because I wasn't sure, but because I wanted to find the right words. Yeah, I said finally. I am. Are you? He nodded, his hand reaching up to brush a strand of hair from my face. I am more than okay, actually. We stayed like that for a while, lost in the quiet intimacy of the moment. But as the world outside began to wake, so did our reality of our situation. The questions, the implications, the inevitability of what came next. They lingered at the edges of my mind, waiting to be addressed. Asterisk. Asterisk, what now? I asked softly, voicing the thought that had been circling in my head. He sighed, his expression thoughtful. Asterisk. Asterisk, I don't know, he admitted, but I do know that last night wasn't a mistake. The weight of his words settled over me, grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. He wasn't running from this, wasn't trying to downplay it or dismiss it as a fleeting moment. He was standing in it with me, facing the unknown together. Asterisk. Asterisk, I don't want this to end, I said, surprising even myself with the honesty of the statement. Asterisk. Asterisk, neither do I, he said, his hand finding mine and lacing our fingers together. There was a knock at the door, soft but insistent, and the spell between us broke. My heart leapt into my throat as reality came crashing in. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'll get it, he said, sitting up and throwing on a shirt. He turned back to me, his expression serious but calm. Asterisk. Asterisk, stay here, okay? I nodded, my pulse racing as he stepped out into the hallway. I could hear muffled voices but couldn't make out the words. My mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening until he returned a few minutes later, his face unreadable. Asterisk. Asterisk, it was your friend, he said, his voice careful. He's back. Panic surged through me. Does he? He shook his head. Asterisk. Asterisk, no. I told him you were still sleeping. Relief flooded my chest, but was short-lived. The reality of our situation loomed large, and I couldn't ignore the complexities that lay ahead. Asterisk. Asterisk, I should go, I said, sitting up and reaching for my clothes. He stopped me, his hand on my arm. Asterisk. Asterisk, you don't have to, he said, his eyes searching mine. We'll figure this out together. I wanted to believe him, wanted to hold on to the hope that we could navigate this without losing what we'd found. But as I looked at him, I realized that no matter what happened next, something had already shifted between us, something that couldn't be undone. Asterisk. Asterisk, okay, I said finally, my voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside me. Together, he smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made me feel like everything might actually be okay. As I left the room, slipping back into the normality of the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had changed. The bond we'd formed was fragile but real, and it was up to us to protect it, to figure out what it meant and where it would lead. The day stretched on filled with the usual rhythms of life, but beneath it all was the quiet hum of something new, something neither of us fully understood, but both of us were willing to explore. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of gold and crimson, I realized that this was just the beginning. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of where it might lead, because wherever it went, I knew I wouldn't be walking it alone. Asterisk. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more heartfelt, emotional, and sometimes heart-wrenching tales.